Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Campbell. I'm the District 4 City Councilor. I want to acknowledge Councilor McCarthy, Tim McCarthy, and Councilor Tito Jackson, who are sitting with me. This is a hearing on docket number 0356 in order for a hearing to review the Boston Police Department's proposed body-worn camera pilot program. I am the chair of the Committee on Public Safety and Criminal Justice. I want to remind you that this is a public hearing. It is being recorded and broadcast on Comcast Channel 8 and RCN Channel 82. Please silence any of your cell phones, laptops, any electronic devices. We're actually going to do this hearing a little bit differently. So I've been in touch with many folks in the room, along with my colleagues, Councilor Jackson, Councilor McCarthy, because today is the wake of an officer we lost recently. Out of respect for those who wanted to attend that funeral, I told BPD as well as the Social Justice Task Force to not attend this hearing. We are going to schedule a follow-up hearing where we will have representatives from BPD as well as the Social Justice Task Force with us on that day. We lost 2 officers this week, and actually, to start, I would like to quickly take a moment of silence for Officer Michael Baker and Sergeant Detective Richard Clancy. Thank you. So because we're going to do this a little differently, I did not want to cancel this because I knew a few folks from the public were going to come. And in the spirit of the community meetings we've been having related to body cameras, I wanted to give folks an opportunity to come forward and actually testify. And you can do that in several ways. One, you can come forward and say simply you're in support of body cameras and explain why. You can come forward and say you have some thoughts on privacy or retention or things as we are contemplating and developing a policy for the 6-month pilot program. So I'm simply going to do public testimony. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge Councilor Matt O'Malley, who's also joined us. But I want to also acknowledge Councilor Tito Jackson and allow him to say a few words as the sponsor of this ordinance.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think this is a critical issue and a critical time for the city of Boston. The city of Boston is known for community policing, but I think it's absolutely critical that we have 21st century community policing, and that be enabled by body cams worn by our police officers. I think it is to note that the Boston Police Department has actually had about $37 million in settlements over the past 7 years. So this is actually not only something that looks towards accountability as well as transparency on the behalf of the community, but I also think it is to the benefit of officers to have body cams worn in the interactions that they have with the public. There has been a lot of back and forth about whether we should or will do this. I am encouraged that we will be doing this, and I believe that not only we should push forward with a pilot, but that we should scale this program so that is universally and ubiquitously worn, that these are worn by all of our police officers. I think it is critical that we hear the specific aspects of a plan relative to when they should be turned on, what instances they shouldn't be turned on, how the data, which thousands of hours of data will be collected. Who is going to have access to that data? There's some really important questions that are present. And I want to give props to an organization, BPCAT, who has really done a good job at researching and making sure that this information has been in the forefront. And Sagan Idawu, one of the organizers I see here. So I am encouraged that we continue to push forward with this, but I think it's absolutely critical that we have Commissioner Evans and Chief Gross before us soon to have the conversation about how we implement, how long we're going to implement, how many officers will be involved, and then how we look forward to scaling. And I just want to note, this is not punitive. This is not an affront to the Boston Police Department. I believe this really is about us being accountable and transparent to the people that we serve, and with the over $400 million budget that is the Boston Police Department. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Jackson. I want to acknowledge Councilor Josh Zakem has also joined us. Councilor McCarthy, you want to say a few words?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd quickly like to thank Councilor Jackson for bringing this very important subject to the floor. But I'd also like to thank and congratulate you, Councilor, for chairing the Public Safety and Criminal Justice Committee. You've held meetings throughout Boston. It's been an unbelievably positive conversation between residents and police and elected officials, going through a lot of the information and the scenarios that we're receiving to craft this policy right and do it once and do it right is what my father always said. You know, measure twice, hammer once, and I think it's a wonderful job you're doing. So I look forward to continuing to hear more thoughts and ideas on this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor O'Malley, do you want to say a few words? Councilor Zakem?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know, thank you and Councilor Jackson for calling this hearing. I think it's important that as we've had a long discussion about this, and I know we've been talking about this pilot program for some time, I think it's great that, you know, the mayor and Commissioner Evans and the Boston Police Department are implementing a program because, as Councilor McCarthy said, we want to make sure we get this right. We want to make sure that not only are we holding ourselves, our city, our police department accountable, but also that we're going to make sure that any new procedures, new equipment adds to the police department's mission of public safety and protecting all of our civil rights. Because with anything new, I think a pilot is a great idea, and we have to work out the kinks so that we can eventually extend this, I believe, citywide to make sure, you know, to bring us in line. We have the technology, we have the ability, and I think there's a lot of folks that we've seen, you know, across this country where having cameras on police officers has been very effective, and I think I'm excited to see it in Boston. I think we're fortunate that we have a police department that is well known for their community policing, well known for their interactions with the community, and that we have not come to this out of a crisis, which is where many other cities, I think, have come to the body camera debate from. We've come to it out of a place of strength, out of a place of inclusion, and I think I'm excited to continue working on this. And thank you for your leadership on this issue. I know just from my Twitter feed how active you have been in these hearings around the city, along with obviously Councilor McCarthy and others. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zakem. So like I quickly explained, we're simply going to use this hearing an opportunity to have folks who have checked off the box and want to testify to come up. But I promised and pledged to the folks in the room as well as residents of the city of Boston that we will do a follow-up hearing sometime this month, later in the month. We will work out dates so that BPD can come. But we also, of course, always want to be respectful, particularly for the losses that took place this week. But I think that's within the instance. So let's jump right in. I actually want to start with Shagun. And Shagun, if Shakia is here with you, that'd be great. If not, Shagun, you want to come forward? I want to also acknowledge that Councilor Michael Flaherty has also joined us. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, councilors. Great to see everyone again for this issue. Again, also want to extend, Shakia could not be here tonight. She wishes that she could. And also want to extend our condolences to the Baker family and the other officer who passed in the last week.
Thank you.
And also understand why the commissioner and the chief could not be here tonight. So all I'll say is actually just scribbling down a few words was that I understood the sentiment that we wanted to have this hearing tonight in order to respect people's time, but I myself find it a little disrespectful to hold the hearing only because we are here in an echo chamber speaking to ourselves. I think, since last week the commissioner wasn't able to attend the hearings, the meetings, that it would be beneficial for him to hear what we have to say as opposed to meeting again to essentially have a fourth community meeting. I just don't find it advantageous to anyone. And I was actually reminded of a Chinese proverb when I was thinking about this, which is to talk much and arrive nowhere is the same as climbing a tree to catch a fish. And I think that we've been climbing many a redwood when it comes to this discussion. So I'm hoping that at the next hearing, it will be a bit more substantive and that it happens before the pilot program begins and that we're able to discuss policy, not just questions that we have, but something that the task force and the commissioner have come up with so that residents who do or who are able to make it are able to add their critiques and their feedback on something that's in front of them. So I guess that's all I'll say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will say this, and in most of the testimony, I'll just allow folks to speak, but I think Shigan and I, we talk, and we will continue to talk. I think where we maybe disagree is two things. One, I am a firm believer that when it comes to developing policy, particularly new policy, that we should get out into the community first, that we should take thoughts and ideas back before we actually put out a proposed policy. And then I think the second step should be, once we take those thoughts, those concerns, those ideas, we use them to actually inform a policy, and then we come back with that to have further discussion. So I see this as twofold. I think the community meetings so far, and we've had 3 of them, have been quite useful. I have BPCAT's policy, which is good. I have ACLU's policy, which is a little different. I have even policy from other municipalities, including one from the city of Methuen, where they did a pilot program. So we're reaching out far and wide to get as many policies, but particularly thoughts and concerns and ideas from actual residents, actual scenarios, to inform the policy. So we disagree a little bit there, but thank you for being here, Shigan, and thank you for your advocacy. The next person I'm going to call down, I think, is Alex Matthews, if I'm saying that correctly. Thank you. And if you could just state your name and if you have any affiliation, and then say what you'd like to say.
My name is Alex Matthews. I'm the president of Digital Fourth, which is a Massachusetts-based civil liberties organization. We have been the people who have been trying to lead the implementation of a statewide body cams mandate through a bill H2170 that we had introduced in the state legislature this session. We have been very supportive of the excellent work that Shigan and the Boston Police Camera Action Team have been doing. And we're very grateful to you, Councillor Campbell and Councillor Jackson and the other councillors for your time and attention to this issue. We're glad that a body cams pilot is happening. But we can't help feeling a little frustrated in the process because there are so many police departments across the nation that have embraced body cams enthusiastically and have worked with the unions and the community ahead of time to figure out good policies. But this doesn't appear to be one of those communities. Commissioner Evans seems like he's having to be dragged into this, his knuckles white with the strain of holding on to past practices that are no longer acceptable. He could have engaged, as community members were pressing him to 2 years ago on this topic, and could have taken seriously the BPCAT policy and the ACLU policy that have already been developed and are already on the table. Instead, it appears that he's conveying to the press that this is all terribly complicated and there are all sorts of serious issues that have not been thought out about how footage should be used, when the cameras should be on or off, the right of the public to access the footage. But whether or not he has been willing to think these things out, other people have. BPCAT, the ACLU of Massachusetts, the Harvard Black Law Students Association, Digital Fourth. We've done our own work on this and have consulted broadly with stakeholders on what good policy should look like. So we're in a better situation than the press is painting. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And as you've been pointing out, there are policies in other cities, even within Massachusetts, that we can be looking at. Commissioner Evans is only doing this pilot, he says, because he hopes it will prove Boston doesn't need body cams. But as one astute observer has put it, this is like doing a pilot of seatbelts in the hope it will prove that people don't need seatbelts because nobody dies during the pilot. And somebody who believes they are really not needed is not going to devise a good policy. Bad policy may turn cameras into purely internal tools, with footage released only when it corroborates officers' accounts of events and facilitates convictions of citizens. Good policy leads to accountability on both sides. And we have here, from a national group, a one-pager entitled What a Good Body Cams Policy Looks Like, which I encourage for your attention.
Can you leave us with a copy
We
of that?
certainly will.
Thank you.
I'll leave you with many. When body cams were adopted in Rialto, California, the police chief handled things a little differently. Chief Farrar worked to get officer buy-in by working with police officer union representatives to craft a joint policy before implementing the pilot. There was frequent and direct discussion with officers to address their concerns, ensuring a smooth transition with little to no resistance from officers. According to Chief Farrar, the program began to pick up steam when officers witnessed instances where officers themselves were exonerated from complaints made against them because of the evidence provided by body cameras. So that is an example of leadership. And I ask today, where are the unions? Has Commissioner Evans brought them to the table to discuss how this will work? Or is he trying behind closed doors to hammer out something that will then be presented to the community as a done deal? We're all well aware that the body cams represent a change in working conditions and that will have to be part of the collective bargaining process if this is to go forward. We know this, but I know that at the state level at least, many legislatures are waiting and they're afraid of what the unions will say and so don't do anything in case the unions happen to object. We have a chance here for Boston to have a model policy on body cams, better than the ones passed elsewhere. And I just thank you for holding this hearing, and I hope it represents real progress in working on an agreement as to what the meat of the body cams policy will be.
Thank you. One follow-up question. If you could leave a copy of that and Dan
Yep,
can grab it
absolutely.
from you. Does Digital
Fourth.
have a policy of their own, or are they
So
signatories to the BPCAT and think that that's a good
just
one?
see. Yeah, that's all right. Good. What our statewide bill does is to set minimum standards and constraints for the policies that police departments might then pass. So the bill itself doesn't go into exhaustive detail always, but it does go into some detail about, say, the minimum quality of the body cameras purchased, certain circumstances where body cameras would have to be turned off, and we've consulted extensively with state legislators on what those circumstances should be. So it's the result of a fair bit of work, and I recommend it to your attention.
I have it, but thank you.
Great.
And thank you for being here.
No problem.
And we will stay connected with us as we set the date for a follow-up.
That'll be awesome. Thank you.
I will say this. I know Reverend Scott is in the audience, and he's a member of the Social Justice Task Force. He's also Social Justice Task Force. He's also a clergy member. He's also a District 4 resident, and I want to acknowledge him as well as Representative Holmes, who's here. They have been attending the community meetings and expressing support. But I want to at least say one thing about Commissioner Evans that I said at some of the community meetings, and I'm saying it to this audience because some folks weren't at those community meetings, in that was the community meetings were spearheaded by this committee as well as the Social Justice Task Force, not Commissioner Evans. I took the lead on saying that we needed to actually be in community, frankly, outside of City Hall, to have these meetings and dialogues and conversations. Commissioner Evans, to his credit, has put together this social justice task force. At the next hearing, those members will be here, not all of them, but hopefully many of them will come so folks can see that they are truly members of the community. We will also put out an extensive list of who those members are. And there are many members of the social justice task force who don't agree with Commissioner Evans, who don't agree with his assessment. I think Reverend Scott had his own ideas and he expressed at a meeting, but there are many who have different perspectives. They're public defenders, they're clergies, they're former prosecutors, they're representatives of the NAACP, you name it. So we will make sure that they will also be present at the next hearing that we have. I want to now call, is it Muska Nasevi? Muska, please come down, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So my name is Muska Nasseri, and I'm a member of the Boston Police Camera Action Team. But I also come before you today as an attorney and as an educator. And I just wanted to tell a little bit, a story that I experienced when I was a law student. And the reason I bring this up is I was here in October, and I think there was some confusion about whether or not Boston even had a problem with police misconduct. And so I come before you today to tell you this story. When I was a third-year law student at Suffolk, I was a Marshall Brennan Constitutional Literacy Fellow. And one of the things that I had to do was teach constitutional law to seniors. And I was lucky enough to be at the Jeremiah E. Burke High School in Dorchester.
A District 4 school, I have to acknowledge.
Oh, they were wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a story that I'll never forget. When I was teaching the Fourth Amendment, stop and seizure, I asked my students, just kind of casually, not expecting it to be a big deal, have any of you ever been stopped by the police? And I was expecting maybe a few hands to go up. Every single hand went up. And that totally stopped my lesson plan, and we instead spoke about each student's experience. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. These were children, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. So if there's any question whether Boston has a problem with police misconduct, I know an entire classroom full of students that would answer that with a resounding yes. And that's it.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing that. Carl Williams.
I brought some copies of some documentation from the ACLU with me and left, I think, enough copies for everyone. Thank you.
And I would encourage folks, if you came in, and usually at the front table here, we like to include copies of ACLU, BPCAT, and other documents. So please take those on your way out if you haven't gotten any. Thank you, Carl, for being here.
Thank you. My name is Carl
And
Williams.
we will also have a follow-up.
I'm sorry?
We will have a follow-up hearing.
Certainly,
Okay.
thank you. So my name is Carl Williams. I work for the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts. I'm a staff attorney working on racial justice issues. But more importantly, I'm a very new, maybe 10 weeks now, District 4 resident, and previously a Mission Hill resident and represented by Josh Zakim. But longtime resident of the city of Boston. So I want to thank you for having this hearing. Also, thank you for having the community hearings. And I want to say that I'm here in support of a body-worn camera program for the Boston Police Department. And the important piece is having the proper policies and procedures in place to ensure police accountability and to protect Bostonians' privacy. And I think it's critical to really set the stage of why these conversations are happening here and why they're happening nationwide. And that is for one reason, the reason why this discussion started, and that is for police accountability. Right, people across the country, I think starting in 2014 and the shooting death, the police shooting of Mike Brown in Ferguson, people all across the United States, right, stood up, took to the streets, took to the internet, and took to forums like this to start demanding transparency and police accountability across the country. And that's something that's happened across Massachusetts, and it's something that's happened here in Boston. people have taken a stand to say that we're demanding that our officers are more accountable and having more accountability out of our police departments in general. And body-worn cameras have been, from the beginning of that movement, body-worn cameras have been a key piece of that discussion, a key piece of a way to ensure, not to fully ensure, but to encourage more accountability. And we know that the NAACP Boston, the Boston Police Camera Action Team, the ACLU, the Black law students at Harvard have all come out and sort of weighed in on this in many different ways, and community residents, right? So I think it's a fair assessment to say that at the previous hearing, the 3 community meetings, and at this folks that we've heard from today, there is very widespread community support for the idea of not just a voluntary, but across the Boston Police Department for body-worn cameras for officers that are encountering public on, as we lawyers would say, in terms of Fourth Amendment encounters, right? Engaging people on the street, traffic stops, and the like. I'm going to skip a bunch because I think there's some specific points that I really want to get to. But there's been a lot of discussion that about what the correct implementation was. And if we have a proper implementation, it really protects people on both sides of the badge. It protects police and it protects the citizenry, the people of the city of Boston. And there's been a lot of studies. I won't mention them. Folks from BPCAT mentioned those, and that's in some of the documentation. And there are model policies that exist. And I'll say many, if not every single one, of the questions that have been raised in forum are answered by the policies. That doesn't mean that that's the end-all be-all. It's like, should a deletion policy be 3 months? Should it be 6 months? Should it be 9? Should it be 1? There are a lot of really good reasons to make it longer because you have something, it's not deleted now, you can use it. Or if they're shorter, it's a lot less expensive, right? And that's also in terms of privacy. If it's deleted, someone doesn't have to worry about that terribly embarrassing thing being out in the public. So those are up for debate, but they're things that part of the debate, I really want to see that part of the debate saying, is 3 months good? How expensive is that going to be? Is 9 months good? Is that enough time for someone, if they had an incident and maybe were arrested on it, to find out, hey, I'm out now. Maybe we talk to some public defenders, maybe some people on the social justice task force can address those issues. But I think stated briefly, the answers to a lot of the questions, and even one of the questions that you, Councilor Jackson, had, I think are answered by some of these. First is what we record, right? And officers should record. I'm actually going to step away from sort of my prepared thing in this and say it's like your radio, right? So 90% of and this is my information. I was a public defender in Roxbury and Dorchester in my neighborhood for 7 years, and I've probably represented folks on maybe 1,000 criminal matters in the city. And officers do these. Everyone knows this. You're like, this is car 41. I just pulled someone over. I'm going to check to see what's going on. Like, you walk up to the car. You see what happens. You give a ticket. You arrest the person. You say, hey, you shouldn't have went through that crosswalk, and you let them go. You come back to the car. You're like, I checked on it. No arrest. We're done. And you call in a code. You hang it up. Similarly, you get a call and you say there's domestic violence at 552 Massachusetts Avenue. Go check it out. Same thing. You call it in. Car 21 responding. I'm going to go check it out. See what happened. There's an arrest. There's some incident that happens. There's not an arrest. You go back to your car and you have a closeout call. You say, I did it. It's done. You call in a code, and that thing is over. It's nearly identical with a body camera. For that incident, the same time you call in, I'm going to go check it out. Click, click. It's just one more click. And it's not going to record your private conversation about your spouse that you're having trouble with your partner. It's not going to record you in the bathroom. It's not going to record this parade of horribles that a lot of people have said. It's incident encounters, basically. It's incident encounters. Sometimes maybe there's a cop on the street, something happens that they didn't expect. Someone throws a rock at them and they're like, what happened? And maybe in that instance, you're going to want to record that because something is going to happen and you say, hey, this should be documented. And sometimes that will happen, sometimes it won't. But essentially what should be recorded are incident calls, service calls. And what shouldn't be recorded are sensitive information regarding private spaces unless there's civilian consent. And I'll say the really easy way to think about that for the lawyers in the room is it's like a warrant, right? When you go to someone's door and you knock on the door, the question should be asked. I have a camera. I'm going to come into your house. I would need your consent to record that. And that is going to be on camera. Be like the person says yes or the person says no. They say no, you turn it off when you go in, or you don't go in. That's very similar to way a warrant entry would work. If someone says no, I don't consent to you coming in my house, and you don't have a warrant, you can't come in. So I think that's a strong parallel. What to do with the video? Police officers should be permitted to review body camera footage after they write their initial report. And police departments should promptly delete video following a short retention period. And as we said, that can be variable, and that's a debatable point, but we're currently saying 6 months. But police officers should not be able to review the video to write their initial report. And I think that's a point of great debate, but it shouldn't be to make you remember what you saw, right? You should remember what you remembered, right? Not things that the camera remembered. And then lastly, what to do when policies are violated. Police officers should be disciplined for violating camera policies just as they are with other rules. And police officers should not be subject to discipline for minor departmental infractions that happen to be recorded from body cameras. So I think those are the really important points. And I'm going to quote Councilor Jackson and say, we need 21st century community policing. I really like that. Can I adopt that? But we're talking about community policing. This is 21st century community policing. People want it. It is we haven't done a poll, but if you were to ask me, it looks like it's 95% support across the city for this. People really want to come out. People want to do it. And I'll just say this to sort of wave the Boston flag. It's like, we're a city of champions. We're a city of technology. We're a city of absolute sports legends. And we can win at all those things. This is an easy thing to win at. And we have the policy, and we can do it, and we can get it right.
Thank you, Carl, and not only for being here tonight and for the policy, but also for coming to the community meetings, you as well as Washawn Hall, who's also here. I appreciate it, and this will be a continued dialogue. I want to quickly acknowledge Councilor Ayanna Pressley, who's here, and just a friendly reminder, we will definitely have a follow-up hearing soon. I want to also read a letter from Councilor Anissa Essabi George, who couldn't be here. Councilor Campbell, I regret that I am unable to attend today's public safety and criminal justice hearing and docket number 0356 regarding Boston Police Department pilot program on body-worn cameras. Today is the birthday of my triplets, and I am celebrating their entry into double digits. I have been happy to participate in what was a productive and enlightening community process with Councilor Campbell. I support the body-worn camera pilot program, look forward to the process of creating the policy, to a thorough and efficient training, and to a smooth implementation of the pilot. Last, I feel it's important that the policy is dynamic and is written so that it can be revisited and revised at different intervals as the city and its residents change. I look forward to working with my colleagues on the council to support and raise awareness of this program and promote its benefits. I will closely review all testimony given here today and hope to contribute to any future conversations. Thank you sincerely, Councilor Anissa Essabi George. And I have Ashley Brown. Ashley. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ashley Brown. I'm here representing the Boston branch of the NAACP. And I just want to start by thanking you, Chairwoman Campbell, for your leadership and the series of meetings that have occurred in the city, as well as this time in this space here today, as well as City Councilor Tito Jackson for this ordinance. I'm going to keep my remarks short because I am looking forward to...
And you'll be back.
Yes, to our follow-up conversation on this. But I do want to reiterate our support for this ordinance. I want to particularly highlight as we go forward with a pilot program that we have an unfiltered record of interactions. That's what we're looking for. Something that can speak to the kinds of complaints that we get in our branch office on a weekly basis. Things that are not necessarily always coming down to crime logs or crime data. I think, as the commissioner has highlighted, that that oftentimes these interactions are short. They are one-off stops, if you will, and so those are the kinds of complaints that we are receiving in our office. And so those are the kinds of things we want to look at. They're not necessarily rooted in a crime per se, but that we want to look at these different interactions that are happening to folks in the community. We also are wanting to really push and advocate for a pilot that will be as robust as a full-fledged long-term program, something that would include all of the aspects of discipline, looking at all the different ranges of technology that we can have at our disposal. We don't want to just run a program, a pilot program, for the sake of running a technology or testing a device. We really want to see this pilot program be robust, one that has all of the aspects of policy that we would expect that would come with a long-term program. And so those are my remarks, just as brief as they are for right now. We certainly look forward to future conversations on this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley, for being here. And I will say we'll stay in touch with you regarding a follow-up hearing. And I think why I'm being very intentional about taking time in developing this policy and not rushing it is for what you just said. It's not simply about a pilot program. If we think about doing this long-term, it should be something that's robust and also incorporates the ideas not only of the NAACP, ACLU, BPCAT, and so many others. So thank you for being here. I don't have anyone else listed right now who wants to offer public testimony. If you do, please come forward. You can go on either side of this podium on the right or on the one on the left. Just come forward. And just a reminder to folks that when we have a new date, we will put out a notice sooner than later so folks can plan accordingly. Thank you. How are you doing? If you could just state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Mallard.
Good to see you,
You
Mark.
know some of my people, Tito. Lamont Collins.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, Robert Mallard, those are my people. I am a member of the Mayor's Council on a Person with Disability. I'm also outreach coordinator for NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. I have a distrust for the police, period. So my question is, who is policing all of this? How are we going to know that they can't hit a rewind button? Is there a way that we can make sure that instead of having the police watch over it, that there's a separate organization? As I understand, from my experience, the police always take care of the police. It always seems something always seems to be missing. Is there going to be a way that we can see if a piece of tape is missing, and what's the ramifications for that? If an individual is trying to hide something, is there going to be a punishment? Let them know ahead of time that there's a punishment for them hiding what shouldn't be hidden? I do like it. I think there's some issues about it with privacy and when it should be turned on and off. But my biggest issue is, are they going to be able to erase it, rewind it, or whatever they do to hide it? You know and I know, inherently, we had problems with police doing what they wanted to do. I just want to make sure that if they're going to do it, that it stays fair, and an impartial person is the one that does the rewinding and erasing. How long are we going to be able to hold this tape footage? Are we going to be able to have it for 6 months, 3 months, 2 days? These are the things that make a difference, because some problems don't arise until a week later when the person gets out of jail. And if it only has a week storage, then that tape is gone and his evidence is gone. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for hearing me and for being here.
No, thank you for being here. And I will say, these are the very questions and so many more that have been raised at the 3 community meetings we've had so far in different scenarios. And one thing that's been clear is we don't have that all figured out. So, for example, one of the questions that came up was about access. Who has access to the footage after it's been recorded? If it should be BPD, or if it should be a third-party vendor, and the possibility of using a third-party vendor. So, and most of the folks that we've spoken to in the room prefer a third-party vendor for some of the reasons that you expressed. Storage, how long it should be stored, who should be storing it. There are various policies that speak to strengths for 3 months, 6 months. There are some folks who think it should be a year or even permanent. So all these things we have to consider. I will say also on the penalties. So Carl Williams from the ACLU got up, and there are some policies that articulate penalties. And so folks had their own ideas about what penalties could look like that maybe weren't necessarily expressed in the policies that we received. So these are things we'll definitely are considering. And so it's good to hear your thoughts, your concerns, and we will bring those back and make sure they're made a part of the conversation. Thank you.
Your committee doesn't have any people from the other side on it, do they?
So this committee on public safety and criminal justice it consists of all the counselors. So there are voting members, and I of course can get you their names, but every member of the Boston City Council is a member of this committee.
And what I mean by this is, a man could never tell a woman what it's like to have a baby. We'll always dismiss something. Police would never tell you what it's like to feel being abused because he hasn't been abused. So as you go along, I encourage you to get people with lived experience in dealing negatively with the police on your council so that they can tell you what it's really like, because what you're hearing is not always the truth. It's been filtered 4 or 5 times through the paperwork. I'm a person with lived experience with mental health and drug addiction. And I've recovered, and I come back to help people. And I found out that the people that read the books are limited to their knowledge of what's between their binder. They don't have that understanding, that fear of having a gun pointed to your head. And that makes a difference when you make a policy and you don't understand what it feels like to be on the other end.
I will say this, the purpose of doing those community meetings outside of this building and in community was to get at just that, to actually get different perspectives on what it means to engage with police, to also get perspectives from officers. So some of the community meetings, we had officers also attend, some of whom were undercover. So we will say, I will say the purpose of these community meetings is to get at these experiences. And so we will continue to do that. There will be another hearing where we'll have more of a robust conversation, and we will continue to let you know when that is. Stay in touch with us. We'll let you know sooner than later.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here. So in an effort to be respectful of folks' time, I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to give Councilor Sheila Jackson and Councilor Presley, if you want to say a few words before we wrap up. Councilor Jackson.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I would request that our next hearing be someplace in the community, because I think you make a really good point relative to the fact that these warm, or actually not so warm walls in City Hall it may seem like a world away for individuals in the community. So I would request that we work something out where we actually host this in the community. I would say I want to thank Carl. I want to thank Ashley from the NAACP. I want to thank Sagun from BPCAT. I think one of the things that we really need to be deliberate about doing is ensuring all of these voices are at the table. We have an opportunity to do, since we're not the first, we can definitely be the best relative to the implementation here. We are a city that actually is a leading technology state and a leading technology city. We have a part of our city that's actually even referred to as the innovation district. Innovation can't exist only in a bubble. It actually should permeate the city of Boston and should permeate our police department. And as the brother spoke, I think it is critical that we have as many people at the table. And I think it's also critical that we have some folks from the police department at the table. And as noted, I think this is a policy that we need to actually bring forward in connection with the department, because as noted, we will have to change, and this is a bargaining table issue. Our council does not participate in that, but I think it is very important that folks are at the table. I think there's a lot that we can learn relative to the Campaign Zero, join CampaignZero.com. There's a lot of this information that's actually already out there relative to. It is my thought. There shouldn't be no rewind button on the on the camera, right? So, and the information should be external to the police department and available to the civilian review boards or the DA. I think that's a good way to go about doing things. But I think it's really critical that we actually roll our sleeves up and are speaking about specific decisions that we need to make. We know the decision points that actually have to happen. 3 months, 9 months, a lifetime. Let's figure those actual specific decision points out that have to be made. I don't believe we're not reinventing the wheel here. Again, the city of Boston has we haven't had dash cams. There was a whole show called Cops. It was on for 20 years, and we didn't have dash cams for most of that time. It's about time that we step our game up in this space and really move towards 21st century policing and having the level of accountability. And as noted before, this isn't only for the community. There have been several times where police have been exonerated on that side. When we look at the budget that we have, $37 million, I believe they corrected me last time they were here, $38 million is a lot of money. And that's essentially our budget because that's what we've already spent in the past 7 years. We should not spend that additional dollars, and we should not prolong this. Let's get started. Let's figure this out. We are a city that is known for leading and not following. It's time for us to step up in our leadership capacity and move forward as a city, as a community, as a police department, and hold the police department accountable and really open the eyes of transparency on policing in the city of Boston. I look forward to our next hearing, and as I noted, my request would be that we do it someplace outside of the ugly walls of City Hall.
Councilor Presley?
Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
So I also just want to, commend Councilor Jackson for putting this forward and commend the chair for making sure that we are in community in these discussions and actively listening, to the point that's already been made, but it does bear repeating. We struggle to make sure that we're not recycling the voices that we hear from and the perspectives that we bring to the table, but not just that we're listening, but that we are then honoring those recommendations. I do think it is necessary that we move with deliberate urgency here, and I appreciate that people keep using the word robust. Being deliberate, being intentional. I have to remind people that in government, we are not venture capitalists. This is not a startup. This is about people's lives. And so we want to make sure that we get this right and that it is responsible. And, I do just want to say that I've seen a great shift in how we talk about this. I think in the beginning, as we were considering this ordinance, I felt that we were in rooms that were very defensive on both sides, however you define those sides. And, at the end of the day, this is not to say that there has not been progress made in the city of Boston. This is an acknowledgement that we are in some ways better than we used to be, but still not who we can be. And this is an opportunity for us to get there through law change, through policy change, through culture shift. So this isn't about being anti-officer or pro anything or anyone other than being pro progress and healing. And, the last thing that I would say before doing some shout outs as well is that, one of my favorite quotes from Dr. King said that, laws don't change hearts, but they can restrain the reckless, and that really is so very true. And so I just want to, in our efforts to do exactly that, I want to acknowledge the contributions and the sweat equity of so many social justice organizations and individuals in this room, BPCAT, NAACP, ACLU, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and all of you that made it your business to be here today and that are watching online and on television. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Presley, and thank you, Councilor Jackson. So like I said in the beginning, we will obviously have another hearing. We will make sure that we do it sooner than later. It's budget season, so we have to be respectful of all of the hearings that are currently on the calendar. But we will make sure that we will have representation not only from the Social Justice Task Force, so people know who these folks are, also from BPD. And I will say this, as chair of Public Safety and Criminal Justice, it was very important that we get out to community to hear folks' experiences, to bring not only what we're doing down here out into the community, but more importantly, to listen to community. I think as much as I have respect for all the policies I've received, the ACLU, the BP CATS policy, and many others, and I've actually reviewed them closely, I still felt like there were some voices missing. And so the intention behind the 3 community meetings and the intention behind the community meetings was to get more of those voices and to make sure that they too were part of the policy discussions. We will continue in that stead. We will continue in that regard. And I will say thank you for all the folks who came out today. If you want to stick around, you have other things you want to share with us, please do. We are here, but we will let you know when we have that follow-up hearing. Thank you again. This hearing is adjourned.